Good afternoon, everyone. This is the pre-launch news conference for TDRS-K, NASA's Tracking and Data Relay Satellite, to be launched on Wednesday aboard an Atlas V rocket built by United Launch Alliance. And in our briefing today, our participants, leading off, will be Badri Yunus, the Deputy Associate Administrator for Space Communications and Navigation at NASA headquarters. Tim Dunn, the NASA Launch Director from the Kennedy Space Center. Vernon Thorpe, the Program Manager for NASA Missions from United Launch Alliance in Denver. Jeffrey Gramling, the NASA TDRS-K Project Manager from Goddard Space Flight Center. And Joel Tumbiolo, the Launch Weather Officer from the 45th Weather Squadron at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. And we'll begin our briefing with opening remarks from Badri Yunus. Badri?
Thank you, George. I would like to mention that there are two critical functions and essential functions without which space exploration and all kind of science that we do in space wouldn't have been possible. These are the launch services and the space communication and navigations. These two functions, if you don't have and you don't perform them successfully, you cannot do any science or human exploration in space. Space communication navigation SCAN is the program office at headquarters responsible for all NASA space communication navigations. I'm the Deputy Associate Administrator, and I'm also the Program Manager for SCAN. I have a few slides to show you to explain a little bit about our program and the value we add to the nation. First slide. Second slide. SCAN is a very intricate and complex program. We have assets all over the world providing communication and navigation services to a whole wide variety of space users. And they can vary from suborbital users all the way to users who are now presently crisscrossing the boundaries of all our solar systems. We have three separate networks that have evolved independently over time, catering to the specific needs of the various missions. These are the Near-Earth Network, the Deep Space Network, and the Space Network. Next slide. At any day, we support over 100 missions. Anything you see coming from space has to go through us, has to be enabled by us. And these are the kind of missions, coded per the network that provide that support. Sometimes two networks may be providing support to the same mission. And I will talk about the specific networks. Next slide. The support is provided to the human space flight as well as to robotic missions, whether you are doing astrophysics, heliophysics, whether you are doing space research in general, Earth exploration science. It has to go, and it will go, and it's all enabled by SCAN. Next slide. The Deep Space Network essentially supports users that are far away from Earth. And their main characteristic is that they look, and they have been designed to look for faint signal. Imagine a user having a 100-watt transmitter. What's 100 watt? Like a light bulb you have in your home. The further you go away, the less you can see it. Imagine you are yourself billions of miles away. We have the kind of capabilities, antennas, that can detect these signals and bring it back to the user to make sense out of it. The Near-Earth Network essentially caters to missions that are flying around Earth. They are primarily Earth exploration system, studying the weather, studying all kind of sciences that are of interest to us on Earth, about drought, about flooding, about all kind of things that we do on Earth. And it has also evolved over time, and it's an example of efficiency because we do rely on a hybrid model where, in addition to the NASA assets, we get also support from commercially provided services. The space network is the newest of all of the networks, and it has evolved over time based on need, a need to provide near real-time communication to our users. You know, as you go in space, the further you go, the more visibility you have to the Earth. But for those missions who are flying very near Earth, you know, because they go over ocean and land, it's tough to provide continuous coverage. I can give you an example. Next slide. The space network, before getting to the example, out of 9 spacecraft we had in orbit, we only have 7 who have survived. The 2 spacecraft that have been retired recently, although they have outlived their expected life expectancy, they failed, and so we had to put them in a retirement home, in an orbit far away from our operating orbit, and we continue to rely on the remaining spacecraft, but many of them are getting old and they need to refurnish, you know. So that's why we will be flying the TDRS-K and the following TDRSs. Next chart. Operationally, we need 7 spacecraft, 6 operational and 1 hot spare, just in case one fails. We move it there and we'll continue to support our users. But the concept started in the 70s for the space network, where in order to provide, sorry about that, in order to continue to provide continuous coverage, we had to move away from the old model where we had so many stations distributed worldwide, along with ships and airplanes. The cost was very high to the agency. Additionally, it only provided 15% coverage. We could do more, so we came up with the concept, and it took us a while to implement it in the 80s, where the kind of coverage had increased to the 85%. By putting data relay satellite in a geosynchronous orbit, looking down on Earth, we were able to see, you know, much of the activities down under the geosynchronous orbit, and in the process reducing the cost and moving away from the dangerous situation where we had to operate previously in dangerous part of the world. The geopolitical situation, you know, was such that, you know, that the cost was high and there were danger associated with accomplishing that mission and providing that support. Next. So we kept on evolving the network, and we added another capability to close a zone of exclusion. Although with 2 spacecraft you can see most of Earth, there was a small sliver that you could not see, and that was about 15% of coverage for altitude below 1,200 kilometers. By putting another station at Guam, we were able to close that zone of exclusion. The success we had with TDRS, you know, made everyone come to us for support. You know, all of the NASA mission wanted to be supported by TDRS. At the beginning, we wanted it to cater to those who required near real-time support, such as the human spaceflight. But when all of the other users saw the value, our requirements started to increase, and we had to add more spacecrafts. Next slide. That's what the example I was referring to. As you can tell, without a TDRS, the green area, the green spots that you see are the only coverage areas. The rest of the time, you know, the spacecraft was in the dark, you know, we couldn't communicate with it. Now with the addition of TDRS, next slide, we provided that 100% coverage. Next slide. Again, our need is based on the requirements that we have that are requiring the 7 spacecraft, and we keep on furnishing new spacecraft to replace failing one. And we expect that need, the requirement to go down between starting in 2016, but and we see more spacecraft failing, but we most probably will be moving from a 7 spacecraft operation to a 5 spacecraft operation based on the requirements that we'll be having in the future. And we don't see any need to any spacecraft beyond K and L and M that we are launching over the next few years until 2022. We are doing reliability modeling now to see how soon do we need to build the next generation of data relay satellites. Next slide. Again, all of the beautiful images, whether you are looking deep into space, trying to discover the origin of the universe, looking at the galaxies, or looking at Earth, trying to see the trend in the weather and the changes that are taking place, looking at also providing support to the space station. All of the voice and the data and the video that you are getting that go through SCAN, without which if SCAN didn't exist, you wouldn't see any of the things that you are seeing. Science couldn't be performed as we know it today. Probably you would have seen a different NASA if NASA could exist without. Next slide. We have a lot more information on the website, and it's given to you over there, but I will be more than happy to take your questions later on.
All right, thank you, Badri. And now to our NASA Launch Director, Tim Dunn. Tim?
Thank you, George. I'm proud to be here today representing the men and women of NASA's Launch Services Program, and I'm thrilled to be the Launch Director for the TDRS-K mission. As Badri mentioned, the voice and data communications of TDRS constellation bring back to Earth every day from the International Space Station, the Hubble Space Telescope, and many of our NASA science spacecraft. It touches each of our lives. Working alongside our United Launch Alliance colleagues, the engineers and analysts of NASA LSP take great pride in readying TDRS-K to join this constellation. NASA has a terrific record flying on Atlas V. We've successfully launched 7 missions on this rocket, missions to Pluto, Jupiter, the Moon, the Sun, the radiation belts, and 2 spacecraft to Mars. TDRS-K will be the 8th NASA mission on an Atlas V and the 35th Atlas V overall. TDRS-K will launch on the Atlas V 401 configuration vehicle from Space Launch Complex 41. Slick 41 is proud to have hosted 29 Atlas V launches to date.